Hello, welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Mary and today's video is going to be my wrap up for the month of November. In November, I did manage to read 12 books, which is very exciting. I did not complete my TBR, so if you watch my Sorry Picks My TBR video, I did not complete everything on that list. However, I read 12 books, so I'm pretty proud of myself. I think there's actually only one book that I didn't end up reading at all. Everything else I at least started in the month of November. That's pretty exciting, but as always, I go through these books in the order in which I enjoyed them, which means that I start with my lowest rated books and I end up with my 5 stars. If there are any, spoiler alert, I have 3 5 stars to talk about this month, which is very exciting for me. Any books that I read for a reading vlog, I will not be talking about as in depth, hopefully. I'm not very good at keeping that promise, but I am gonna try to sort of skim over those so you can watch my full thoughts in the vlog. One of the vlogs that I have for this month is actually not out yet, but it will be, I think it'll be the video you see after you see this video, if I'm not mistaken. So without further ado, I'm just gonna jump in with my first read of the month, which is my most disappointing read, and it actually is a 1 star. I read Beneath the Keep by Erika Johansen, and this is the prequel to the Queen of the Tearling, Fate of the Tearling, etc. series by Erika Johansen that I read a couple months ago. I read the entire series back to back to back. I could not put it down. I thought it was so great. But the ending kind of disappointed me. And then I knew I wanted to read this book. I purchased it as an audiobook from audiobooks.com because my library didn't have it at all. And I guess I wish I DNF'd it, basically. I gave this book 1 star. I really didn't like my read of it. I thought it was kind of boring. It was about characters that I didn't really care about. There are a couple things that I really didn't like about it. One is that the characters that it follows aren't the ones that I sort of wish had been followed. Like, I wish this book had actually been the 300 years in the past, like I thought it was in the vlog where I read the other books, but it's not. It's literally like right before Kelsey is born in like what happens in the kingdom there. And it follows specifically one of the Queen's Guards, Alyssa, which is Kelsey's mom, and like that whole thing. So I think if I'd liked the series ending more, I might've been more interested in that, but I'm just really not. And also I really felt like it used a cop-out for why Alyssa ended up the way that she did. I don't want to spoil it in case you do want to read it, although I do think that it's like not worth the read. Like, I would say if you liked the rest of the series, don't bother with the prequel. It's not worth it. It doesn't really make sense with the way the series ended up. It also like kind of cheapens some of the characters, and it just uses a really big cop-out to explain things, which I again hated, which again is also what happens at the end of the series. There's like a huge cop-out, which is stupid. So for me, this was a miss. I absolutely hated this book. I don't give 1 stars very often because 1 star for me is I wish I DNF'd it. And usually I just will DNF something, but I'm bad at DNFing audiobooks, and I did not DNF this, and I wish I had. I also read that for the fantasy prompt on my Sorry Picks My TBR. The next book I'm gonna talk about, now we're up to 3-star reads. 3 stars for me is book is just fine. I have a couple of 3 stars this month because, to be honest with you, a lot of books are fine. Like, there's nothing really wrong with them, but I don't like love them. I'm not gonna like shout their praises from the rooftops, and this is one of those. This I read for Nonfiction November. I believe I read this for the prompt Web in that readathon, and this is A Short History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson. So this book is basically exactly what it says on the tin. It's a short history of pretty much everything on Earth. It goes back to like the Big Bang and how we theorize that the Earth got here, and then all the way through like animals, how early humans evolved from Neanderthals, etc., etc., etc. I will say, if you have like a decent background in science, you know all of this already, or most of it. Like, most of this was not new information for me, and it didn't go in depth enough for me to find this like super interesting. I also really didn't like the audiobook narrator, and I listened to this as an audiobook. I don't know what it was about him, but I found it like pretty easy to tune out, which is not great. And generally, I just thought this book was kind of boring. It just didn't really have the like draw or appeal. And like I said, it didn't go as in depth with any of the subjects to make it like super worth reading to me. So I would say if you do just generally want like a baseline of everything, you might be able to find like the topics somewhere. And if you're interested in a particular topic, learn about that. But I knew most of this information already. Like, not a lot of it was new to me. This also came out a while ago. I think it came out in the 90s or early 2000s, which means that it's been like 20 or 30 years. And so we know more about most of these topics than we did when he wrote this book. So that also could be why I already knew most of this. I hope that makes sense. The next 2 books I'm just gonna cover briefly because I did vlog my reading experience with them. I decided to do a dark academia themed reading vlog this month because I ended up putting For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing on my TBR. And so for this, I read For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing, Ace of Spades by Farida, Farida Abike Iyamide. I don't know how her name is pronounced. I'm really sorry about that. And then I also am reading Babel by R.F. Kuang for this, but I did not finish that in November, so I will not be talking about it in this vlog or in this video. But just briefly, both of these tout themselves as dark academia. They are both set in high schools. For Your Own Good, I gave 3 stars. I thought it was fine. I thought it was pretty predictable, which is why I didn't like super love it. And I also didn't feel like it was dark academia enough. I don't know what I want dark academia to be. I think I need to read like If We Were Villains, I think is one that people talk about, and the original one by Donna Tartt, which is, the name is escaping me right now, but I think I need to read those. I haven't yet, to see if all of these books actually are dark academia. But from what people talk about with dark academia, I just feel like these don't really fit the vibes. They're just set in a school. So that's my like biggest critique. For Your Own Good is about a teacher at this like elite prep school, and he basically like is really hard on students that he feels have it too easy in their lives. So he like will give bad grades to students he doesn't like and stuff. And then also he's like tinkering with other people at the school. And it's essentially just a story of how like things get out of control and he accidentally murders someone. So that's For Your Own Good. I mean, it's a fun, like kooky idea. I just think I was disappointed because it's very like You coded, if you read You by Caroline Kepnes, but I feel like it doesn't do as good of a job of making you root for the villain, if that makes sense. I hope it does. Although I have seen reviews, I can't remember who it was, but they were a teacher and they read this book and they were like, it's like very cathartic for them. So maybe if you're a teacher and you have to deal with like annoying parents, annoying administration and like rules and stuff, and it's like in your wheelhouse, maybe you would like it more. I don't know. So I just want to give that caveat. I'm not a teacher. I've never taught anything in my life, and thank God for that. Similarly, Ace of Spades is also set at an elite prep school, and it follows the 2 Black students at this school. It's like compared to Gossip Girl and Get Out. So I don't think it's that similar to Gossip Girl, except for that it's set in an elite prep school. And I honestly think I would have liked it more if it had been more similar to Gossip Girl. But we follow one student named Chiabaka, who is like head girl, whatever. And then this guy who never really participates in anything at school. His name is Devon. He gets the head boy position, and he's like not really sure why. And then they start getting texts from this anonymous source, basically spilling all their secrets. And so that's like the premise. Very Pretty Little Liars-esque, except for Pretty Little Liars, I hate to say it, is done better. What I like about Pretty Little Liars is that the girls are getting targeted, so they're being like blackmailed by their secrets, basically. And I think that's a more interesting concept. So for me, this was fine. I really enjoyed, frankly, this got higher than For Your Own Good because For Your Own Good just got monotonous to me to read. Like it got kind of boring. Ace of Spades, I was like really entertained by, but I felt like the author could have, like there were a couple of slips that I talk about more in the vlog that I wish had been different. And then I think the book could have been much better. But again, those are just my opinions. I know a lot of people really love this book. So, but for me, and again, I'm not the target audience for this because this I think is YA. So I'm not the target audience. I'm 28 years old. But I had like certain critiques that I feel like would have been maybe better. And then my first 4-star, this is like a 3.5 star that I rounded up kind of for nostalgia's sake, but I read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes in preparation to see the movie. I did do a whole video essay comparing the book to the movie, so if you'd like to watch that, I will link it for you. It does have spoilers, but they're like pretty clearly marked. I like talk about both the book and the movie without spoilers, and then I get into the spoiler section. This is a prequel, again, to The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, and essentially we follow President Snow in the original trilogy. We follow like the 10th annual Hunger Games in this book, which is like, I think 60 something years in the past. And President Snow is at school at the Capitol, and they get this assignment where they get to mentor someone who is coming into the Capitol. And if you don't know the premise of the Hunger Games, just briefly, it basically, there was a war, and as punishment for the districts, there are like 12 districts remaining around the capital of this society called Panem. And as punishment, each district has to send 2 of their children to be like sent to this Hunger Games, and the Hunger Games, you just fight to the death. So it's like battle royale style. It's a really like gruesome concept, but like so interesting. And this book talks a lot about how the games in the books that we saw at the big, like in the original trilogy became the way that they are, because they're very commercialized. They're very like almost glamorized. This book shows how all of that came to be. And it's also President Snow's backstory, and we get like backstory on why he felt the way he did about Katniss. So without saying anything else, Katniss is the main character of the original trilogy if you haven't read it and somehow have never heard of it. That's that book. I gave it 4 stars, 3.5 stars rounded up, because I didn't like the book on its own that much. Like I thought it was fine. I don't like love it, but I do think if you want to watch the movie, reading the book first and seeing the movie bring it to life is like a fantastic experience. So that's my spiel. The next book that I read for one of the prompts. I think I read it for the capital prompt of Nonfiction November, and that was Dead Wake, the last sailing of the Lusitania or something by Erik Larson. I don't remember the subtitle off the top of my head, but this book is set during World War I, and it's basically telling the story of this passenger vessel that was sunk by German U-boats and how it's like a perfect storm that made it sink. And it talks about like the impacts that had on World War I. I really enjoyed this book. And my favorite thing about it is that it uses a lot of like firsthand source material as the story. So like you get the story of different passengers on this ship, and you get quotes from them after the ship sank. You get like recovered artifacts of theirs, like when they're talking about how they felt during the sinking, which made it feel almost like the movie Titanic, where you're like getting the story of the people as it's happening. I know that's like highly fictionalized, and this honestly could have like fictionalized portions. I'm not sure, but I just really loved it. I thought it was so interesting. And like, what's really cool is, if you don't know, I live in Kansas City and we have the National World War I Museum. And so my siblings came in town for Thanksgiving, and we actually went to the National World War I Museum. And I didn't know if this book, I'm not very good with history, okay? I knew it took place during one of the world wars. I wasn't sure which one, but they talk about the Lusitania in the museum, like in the video portion, and like they've got artifacts from it. So I thought that was super cool to just like bring it all together. I went like, I think a week or two after I finished reading this. So for me, that was just like a really cool experience and like coincidence that it happened that way. But I really enjoyed this book. I think if you like historical nonfiction and you like a more narrative style to your nonfiction, I think it's really one to check out. It was really, really good. The next 4-star that I gave out was For the Last Olympian by Rick Riordan. I almost said by Percy Jackson. It's the 5th book in the Percy Jackson series, so I have finally completed the Percy Jackson series. Confirmed, I had never read this book before. There was nothing familiar about it to me, but I really enjoyed it. Like, I like the character Percy Jackson. I do think he's like a little kooky. Definitely it's a middle grade series about this guy who is a son of Poseidon, and he ends up finding out when he's like 12. He's always had weird stuff happening to him, but I think he's like 12, and he has to go to this place called Camp Half-Blood to learn how to fight these monsters because the gods need him to go on this quest or whatever. So it's like about friendship, found family, and also like Greek mythology, which is really fun. I think I would have enjoyed this more had I read it when I was a kid. And I mentioned I reread this whole series over the past couple of years. It took me a while to get to it, but like 3 years. But I really loved my reread of the first 2 books because those have like very established memories for me. And the later 3 books don't have as much like hold on me. But this is the one that I never finished because I just never got to it. And I'm glad I read it. I feel very accomplished. I've heard that they're doing, I know Rick Riordan has other like related series, and I've heard that they're doing like a follow-up that's gonna be focused on Percy Jackson again. I think. I don't know that for a fact. I don't know if I'm going to be reading it, to be honest with you. Like, part of me wants to, but also, like, I don't know if I really care to do that given the sheer amount of books in the world that I actually really am dying to read. So, for now, I'm not saying that I'm going to continue that, but I do feel very accomplished having finished the series. It's cute, it's funny, it's sweet. I really liked it. The next 4-star I want to talk about, I'm actually going to talk about it. Well, no, we'll just do the 4-star first. So I did finally read Gleanings. Oh, and I read Percy Jackson for the middle grade prompt from my Sorry board. And then Gleanings I read for the sci-fi prompt because it's a dystopian book. It's a collection of short stories set in the same universe as the Arc of the Scythe series, which I think is Scythe. I just reread these. Scythe, Thunderhead, and The Toll. And those follow Citra and Rowan as they're being like trained to be scythes because in the society, death has been eradicated. And so you can't die naturally anymore. You have to be gleaned, basically. And there's this group of people who do it. They're called scythes. And then there's like sort of a disruption in the scythehood, and there's like 2 sides, and it's like, it follows from there, okay? But Gleanings was really, really good. So some of the stories I just wasn't as connected to and I didn't care about. There was one that was about like dream sequences that I thought was very boring and I wish I had just skipped it. The best ones for me are ones that follow characters that we meet in the original series. So we get the backstory of the Grand Dame of Death, which I thought was super fun. We get a story about what happened to Citra's brother during a certain span of time. Like, I thought that was really interesting. We also find out about, in the first book, this is like the opening scene, so this is not a spoiler, but Rowan, a scythe comes to Rowan's school and a kid at his school gets gleaned, and Rowan is there with him while it happens. And so this rumor gets spread that Rowan did it. And you see the effect that that had on that kid's family, and especially his younger sister. And I thought that was so interesting. You get more insight into the world of the unsavories in this society. I just thought like the world building was really cool. And I also liked this book focused on scythes at different parts of the world and how they are impacted by the scythe, how they react to the Thunderhead, how things happen. I just thought it was really cool. We also get some like post-series stuff, which I thought was fun. If you've read the series, you know what happens at the end. And it kind of is like abrupt, but I liked getting a little peek into the future, if you will. So I enjoyed that one. But I also finished The Toll. I reread The Toll. I read the series originally in 2021, and I reread them this year in preparation to read Gleanings because I just wanted to. And I upped my rating to 5 stars. I think originally I gave this book 3 stars because I just wasn't fond of the ending, but I've mentioned this a couple times, having reread the series now, it actually, like, the ending does make sense. I felt like it was really out of left field and, like, abrupt, but having reread the series, there's lots of, like, groundwork laid, even in the first 2 books, for what happens in book 3. And I was able to really appreciate that on reread. Plus, I love these characters. I love this storyline. It really does, like, I don't know, it's sweet, I guess. So for me, this is a great series. I really love it. I want to buy the last book in it so that I can have it. And I might buy Gleanings too, just so that I have them all together if I want to do a reread again in the future. But I'm officially done rereading Scythe, finally. It took me a couple months, but here I am. And yeah, I'm really glad I did it. And now we're on to my 5-star reads. And nobody will be more shocked than I am that I gave this book 5 stars. 9 Lies About Work by Marcus Buckingham and Ashley Goodall. So I read this for the fraud prompt. Yeah, for Nonfiction November. I loved this book, okay? I was really surprised. There's one part that made me cry, which is so embarrassing. But this book is basically about like 9 things that corporations and managers think are true and why they're not necessarily true, and what you can do to be like a good team leader, manager, whatever person. It was nice to read how, like, to foster good relationships and like keep people around. I just thought it was really interesting to read. But there's one part in particular about like goal setting, and he talks about how like goals aren't actually that useful because you basically make goals and they're for the present, and then as soon as like 2 weeks go by, those goals might not be relevant anymore because things change so fast these days because we're in such a quick-paced world. So he was talking about how management shouldn't really set goals for their team. You should let your team set goals for yourself. And he used a little anecdote in there. And the anecdote was about an IEP, which is, I don't remember, it's independent education plan maybe, but it's goal setting for usually kids with special needs, right? But it doesn't have to be special needs, but that's like primarily what we see it for. And the example that he gave was a kid who has autism spectrum disorder, and his parents always set these goals, but then they quickly realized that like their kid wasn't hitting the milestones that they needed him to hit. They're like, he's gonna have to live with us forever. And so the parents sort of, it sounds bad to say give up, but they don't really set goals the same way that they used to for him because they don't think he'll be able to accomplish it. And then his senior year of high school, he sets his own goals, and I don't know, it was like this, I don't want to cry again, but like he wants to be able to like graduate from high school. That was one of his things. He had a couple other ones that were really sweet. I can't remember, but I was sitting there trying to get ready for work listening to this, and I had to stop what I was doing because I was crying. But this book is like, the audiobook is really good. I listened to it on audio. I would highly recommend that route. The authors read it, so they go back and forth. I also didn't know Ashley Goodall is a man, so if you didn't know that, now you know. But it was really well done, and I also thought it was like very, I don't know, digestible. I enjoy when nonfiction is not just super clinical and has like little anecdotes in there, little stories. I thought that was really fun. Yeah, I really liked it. I highly recommend this book. So the last nonfiction that I read this month was Hollywood's Eve, Eve Babbitt's and the Secret History of LA. This is another nonfiction book. I read this for the prompt display for the Nonfiction November Readathon. I loved this book, okay? It's about Eve Babbitt, who was like an actress slash socialite a long time ago. So she like was in a relationship with Jim Morrison for a while, and it just talks about like her life. And at this point, the author has met her when she's like a very old woman, and like it's just about their relationship as well as it is about Eve Babbitt's life. And I just found it like, I didn't know that much about Eve Babbitt before reading this, but like the amount of things that she and her sister, whose name I can't remember, just were around for and were involved in is wild. And Eve Babbitt is really well known. There's this picture of her when she's really young where she's playing, it's like from a fashion magazine, I think, but she's naked playing chess with this like man. And so like that's, one of the covers has that picture on it. It's probably not the cover that I'm going to use, but she also wrote a couple of books that became pretty popular in like the mid 2000s or like 2010s maybe, which she wrote them in like the 80s, I think. So like I want to say Miley Cyrus posted on her Instagram story that she was reading one and like a bunch of people started reading them. So it's about like how it feels for her to be famous way after the time that she was doing all of these things in. And then also like just how she feels about her life. And it's also this woman going through her own, like the author going through her own life and sort of not comparing it, but like drawing comparisons there, I guess. So I really enjoyed this book. I cried while reading it. I just thought it was really like powerful and impactful, and I really like narrative nonfiction. And this I felt like was a very good example of narrative nonfiction. So if you like the same type of nonfiction as I do, you might like this book. And then finally, the last book that I'm going to talk about, my favorite book of the month that I've been meaning to read for literally years, and I read for no reason at all. I think I picked it up in October and then continued on. This is the first book that I finished in November. I probably finished it on November 1st when I was wrapping up all my October reads. Beartown by Fredrik Backman. I love this book. So this is about a hockey team in Sweden, and it's like a small town that's basically revolving around this hockey team. And then one night, one of the hockey players essays a girl, and it's about how this assault divides the whole town. And I think it's pretty applicable to things if you, like me, live in the US. When you think of like high school football players who don't really have consequences for their actions because the team needs them to play. I don't know. I thought it was really impactful. It's obviously hard to read at times, but I just thought the messaging was really good, and I loved all of the characters. This is my second Fredrik Backman book that I've read this year. I read The Man Called Ove. Is that how it's pronounced? I don't know. Back in January, I think, and I loved that book as well. I read it in preparation to watch the movie. I have a book versus movie comparison if you want to watch that. But I really like his writing style. Like, he's really proven to me that he's an author that I can trust and that I should read more from. So I know Beartown is part of a series. I will hopefully at some point read the rest of the books in the series. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I didn't know that I was going to, but I did. I loved it. So those are the 12 books that I read in November. Let me know in the comments down below if you have read any of these books and how you felt about them. Also feel free to let me know your favorite book that you read in November. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you have not already, but you would like to see more videos from me, you can go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you. I do try to post 2 videos every single week, and I will see you in another one very soon. Bye!